The morning air above Washington, D.C. hung heavy, thicker than jet fuel. Every network had broken the same story, all flights grounded. Nationwide. But this wasn't weather. It wasn't mechanical failure. This was political turbulence, and somehow, Denzel Washington had become part of it. He stood at the edge of the tarmac, blazer pressed sharp against the cold wind, staring at a row of motionless planes gleaming under the sunrise. Reporters shouted from behind barricades, their mics trembling with urgency. "Mr. Washington, do you still stand by what you said last night? Are you accusing the administration directly?" He didn't answer. Not yet. 12 hours earlier, he'd sat in front of a live audience and uttered 16 words that detonated across the country. If planes can't fly and politics can't lead, maybe truth needs to take the cockpit. The studio had gone dead quiet. Not even the cameras dared to hum. Within minutes, clips flooded every screen, and hashtags ignited like fireworks. Hashtag Denzel grounded them. Hashtag truth in the cockpit. Now, standing at the airport, he wasn't acting. He wasn't promoting a film. He was watching America freeze midair, wondering if his words had just become prophecy. Somewhere behind him, a phone buzzed. His assistant re-whispered. "Sir, the White House wants to respond, live." Denzel didn't flinch. He just whispered back. "Then they better have their landing gear ready." Because this time, the turbulence wasn't in the sky. It was on the ground, and it had his name written all over it. By dawn, the line between rumor and crisis had vanished. Every major outlet was looping Denzel's 16-word monologue, dissecting it like a crime scene. CNN called it a cultural gut punch. Fox called it Hollywood hysteria. But the truth? No one could explain why planes actually stopped flying. At 8:04 a.m., air traffic control towers across 6 states received a temporary halt order from the Department of Homeland Security. Officially, it was due to communication errors. Unofficially, it was chaos. In the Situation Room, the president scowled, red tie crooked, while advisors argued over whether to respond or stay silent. "We cannot let an actor control the narrative," one aide hissed. Another muttered, "It's too late. He already has." Meanwhile, Denzel sat alone in his hotel suite, not rehearsing, not retreating, just thinking. On the desk before him, a folded note in his own handwriting. "Truth doesn't crash. It lands where it's needed most." His reflection in the window looked older, quieter, but sharper. He wasn't playing Malcolm X. He wasn't quoting scripts. He was living one. And for the first time in his career, his audience wasn't in a theater. It was the entire country. Then his phone lit up again, a private number, government line. He hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Washington," a voice said, calm but tight. "The president would like you to issue a statement clarifying your comments before noon. You've caused nationwide panic." Denzel's tone was low, deliberate. "Then maybe the panic isn't mine to clarify." The silence that followed was heavier than static. Outside, the sound of grounded planes groaned like a sky held hostage. And Denzel knew, this wasn't about airplanes anymore. This was about who was really flying the country. The phone didn't stop buzzing. Networks, senators, agents, all demanding a quote, a soundbite, a surrender. By mid-morning, Denzel's words had spread faster than wildfire, mutating into headlines that screamed. "Washington grounds America. The actor who stopped the skies." At 10:17 a.m., the White House decided to break its silence. A live briefing was scheduled. Press Secretary Alan Klein walked to the podium, tie immaculate, voice soaked in control. "The administration rejects the baseless insinuations made by Mr. Washington," he began. "The statement 'planes can't fly, politics can't lead' is reckless, inflammatory, and dangerous in times of national uncertainty." He paused, smirking slightly. "Mr. Washington should remember, he's an actor, not an aviator." Laughter rippled through the press corps. But across the country, no one was laughing. Because while Klein spoke, Screenshots were flooding the internet. FAA memos leaked. Internal communications timestamped 5 minutes after Denzel's broadcast. Someone had grounded the planes. But it wasn't the FAA. It came from the executive office itself. By the time the White House realized what was happening, Twitter had already declared it a cover-up. #Who grounded the skies? #Truth in the cockpit. Inside his suite, Denzel watched the briefing in silence. His assistant re-whispered, "They're calling you a national distraction." He exhaled slowly, eyes still on the screen. "Good," he said. "That means they're finally watching." For a moment, the world saw what he saw, not an actor, but a mirror held up to power. And the reflection wasn't pretty. By noon, the internet was on fire. What started as a whisper had turned into a digital uprising. Screens everywhere flashed the same headline. Confidential memo leaked, Executive Order 781G, airspace shutdown. The document was short, just 2 pages, but the last line hit like a punch. All flights are to be temporarily halted pending narrative alignment with public confidence goals. Pending narrative alignment. 3 words that burn through every newsroom like jet fuel. In New York, anchors scrambled for explanations. In Los Angeles, protesters gathered outside federal buildings chanting, "Truth can't be grounded." And in Washington, the president himself finally broke silence. At 2:03 p.m., from the East Room podium, his voice boomed across every channel. This nation will not be held hostage by actors or agitators who mistake headlines for heroism. Mr. Washington's comments have endangered national unity. He will be held accountable. The applause was polite. The silence that followed was louder. Meanwhile, Denzel sat across from his lawyer, hands clasped, calm as stone. "They want you to retract everything," his lawyer said. "They're threatening federal action, security breaches, disinformation charges." Denzel leaned back, eyes cold but alive. "They grounded the country to protect their image. I'm not retracting truth because it makes them uncomfortable." His phone buzzed again, an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A woman's voice, low and urgent. "Mr. Washington, you don't know me. But I worked on that memo. And I can prove it was signed by the vice president." The line went dead. Denzel's reflection stared back at him from the black screen. He whispered to himself, steady as a verdict. "Then the real flight starts now." Her name was Evelyn Shaw, mid-30s, sharp mind, steady hands, and eyes that had seen too much bureaucracy rot from the inside. She'd worked 3 years in the Office of Strategic Communications, where truth wasn't printed, it was approved. And the memo? She wrote the first draft. That night, as Washington's skyline glowed like a field of nervous circuits, Denzel met her in an underground parking garage beneath a shuttered federal annex. No cameras. No microphones. Only the hum of fluorescent lights above cracked concrete. Evelyn stepped out from the shadows, clutching a manila envelope. "You don't know me," she said. "But you said something last night that got me fired. And for once, I'm glad." Denzel's gaze was calm, but heavy. "You were part of it?" "No. I was part of the lie. Until I saw what they were planning." She slid the envelope toward him. Inside, signed authorizations, timestamps, digital drafts. Proof that the vice president had approved the airspace lockdown, before Denzel's broadcast. It wasn't a response. It was premeditated manipulation. "They grounded the skies," she whispered, "to control the story before it left the runway." For a moment, silence filled the space like a confession no one wanted to own. Denzel looked at the papers, then at her. "Why give this to me?" Her voice cracked, almost invisible. "Because truth without witness dies in the dark." He nodded, the weight settling in. "Then let's turn on the lights." Evelyn's eyes met his, fear and resolve tangled together. And for the first time since the skies fell silent, Denzel wasn't standing alone. By the next morning, the storm had outgrown containment. Airports still quiet. Stocks bleeding. America paralyzed in midair, not from grounded planes, but from grounded truth. At 7:42 a.m., Denzel walked into the WZC studio in downtown D.C., the same place where everything had started 2 nights before. He wasn't invited. He wasn't scheduled. He simply showed up, carrying Evelyn's envelope. Inside the control booth, the producer froze. "Mr. Washington, you can't just." "I'm not asking," Denzel said. "I'm broadcasting." Security hesitated, and maybe it was fear, maybe respect, maybe both, but no one stopped him. At 8 a.m. sharp, the red light above camera 3 blinked on. The nation watched as Denzel Washington, live and unscripted, stared straight into the lens. His voice was low, calm, the kind of calm that cuts deeper than anger. 2 nights ago, I said if planes can't fly and politics can't lead, maybe truth should take the cockpit. Today, I'm proving why. He held up the documents, signatures, timestamps, the vice president's name in bold ink. This isn't conspiracy. This is confirmation. The government grounded the skies to manage your fear, not your safety. Inside the White House, alarms went off, literally. Staffers sprinted toward comms. "Cut the feed," someone yelled. But it was too late. Millions were watching. Evelyn's name trended worldwide in minutes. And for the first time since the crisis began, people weren't panicking. They were listening. "The truth doesn't need permission," Denzel said quietly. "It just needs a signal." He looked directly into the camera, eyes steady. "Consider this the first clear signal America's had in years." Then he stood, removed his mic, and walked off screen. The broadcast lasted only 6 minutes. But by the end of it, the entire country had taken off. The broadcast detonated across every screen in America. For 6 minutes, truth had the mic, and now, power wanted it back. Within the hour, federal networks were flooded with emergency statements. The vice president appeared behind a podium, face tight, eyes glassy, rehearsed fury dripping through every syllable. "What you saw this morning was a fabrication, digitally altered documents, political theater from a man who's forgotten his place." He leaned closer to the mic, voice sharpened like a knife. "Denzel Washington has violated the National Security Communication Act. He will face prosecution." Reporters shouted questions, but the feed cut abruptly. No questions. No dissent. Just control. Back in the studio, Denzel's team had already scattered. Agents outside. Journalists calling. His lawyer pacing, whispering, "You've crossed the line." Denzel sat in the dark, unbothered. There's no line when the map's already burning. Evelyn entered, trembling but defiant. "They're coming after you, Denzel. They'll bury you before they ever admit you're right." "Then they'll have to dig through the truth first," he said softly. That night, footage surfaced, leaked surveillance from inside the vice president's office. The same voice, cold and mechanical. "I don't care who leaks it. We own the sky. We own the story." The clip spread faster than any official statement could contain. Every attempt to suppress it only magnified it. The system had countered, but the counterstrike had backfired. And somewhere deep in the chaos, a single phrase began to appear across walls, banners, screens, and city streets. "Truth flies." The movement had begun. By sunrise, Washington wasn't just awake, it was trembling. The leaked audio had spread to every network, every phone, every feed. No edits. No spin. Just the vice president's voice, arrogant and unguarded. "We own the sky. We own the story. Those 6 words hit harder than any speech Denzel could have given. They weren't just a confession. They were a blueprint of control, proof that leadership had become theater, and the audience was paying for tickets it never asked to buy. By 9 a.m., congressional aides were drafting motions. By noon, resignations began. By dusk, the vice president was escorted from the West Wing, face pale under the camera lights he once commanded. Evelyn watched from the curb outside the Capitol. Her hand shook around a paper cup of coffee, eyes brimming. "He actually fell," she whispered. "No," Denzel said beside her, voice quiet but iron. "He finally landed." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Planes that couldn't fly had grounded the man who grounded them. Inside the White House, the screens went dark. No statements. No spin. Just silence, heavy, overdue, deserved. That night, Denzel stood on the same balcony where he'd once looked out at the silent sky. Below him, a sea of people held candles, phones, lights, not in protest, but in unity. And for the first time in weeks, the hum of engines filled the air again. Planes lifted into the sky, slow at first, then steady. The world was moving again. "Truth doesn't just fly," Denzel murmured. "It lands where it's needed." And as the city exhaled, one banner stretched across the crowd, white paint on black cloth, glowing in the night. "The sky is free again." It wasn't a press conference. It wasn't a rally. It was a field in Pennsylvania, the kind of place where the ground still remembers the sound of history. A simple wooden stage. No teleprompter. No flag wall, just people, thousands of them, faces lit by sunrise and phone screens. Denzel stepped up to the mic, no suit, no entourage. Just a black jacket and a folded note in his hand. The crowd fell silent before he even spoke. "We grounded the skies to control fear," he began, his voice steady, carried by wind. "But fear doesn't disappear when you hide it. It just learns to fly lower." He looked out, teachers, factory workers, veterans, students, nurses. America in its rawest form. "I was told to stay quiet. That politics would fix itself. But politics doesn't heal. People do." A cheer rippled through the air, soft but real. He continued, tone sharpening like the edge of a sunrise. "We don't need louder leaders. We need braver listeners. Power should never come with permission slips." Cameras caught every word, but for once, the world didn't feel like it was watching a performance. It felt like it was remembering who it was. Evelyn stood near the edge of the stage, tears cutting through the exhaustion on her face. A child beside her held a cardboard sign that read, "Truth flies." Denzel saw it, smiled faintly, and finished. Planes can fly again. People can lead again. And maybe, just maybe, truth finally learned how to soar. The crowd erupted, not in noise, but in a collective breath of relief. Not victory. Clarity. Weeks later, the noise had faded. No more panels, no more protests, just quiet. But in that quiet, something had changed. Airports across the country began painting a single phrase on their terminal walls. "Truth flies." Not as a slogan. As a reminder. At LAX, Denzel stood by a massive window overlooking the runway. The morning light spilled across the glass, soft and new. A plane taxied slowly into view, its engines humming, its body glinting gold under the rising sun. He smiled faintly. Back in the air, he murmured. Now his communications director, stood beside him, tablet in hand. "You know, sir, you could have just made a movie about all this." Denzel chuckled softly. "Yeah," he said. "But then they'd call it fiction." They watched the plane lift, slow, powerful, effortless. No politics. No control. Just movement. In his jacket pocket sat a folded note, the one he'd carried since that day on the balcony. He unfolded it, just once more. 6 words in his own handwriting. Power without permission. Truth without fear. He slipped it back, turned toward the terminal doors, and walked into the light. No camera followed, no anthem played. Just a man who'd learned that silence, when chosen, can shake the world louder than any speech ever could. And as the plane disappeared into the clouds, the message stayed behind, not in the air, but in the hearts of those who'd finally looked up and believed again. In the end, it wasn't about planes or politics. It was about truth, grounded, ignored, but never destroyed. When voices fall silent, power grows loud. But when silence speaks with purpose, even the sky listens.